This is not a story about war. This is not a story about medals, or ceremonies, or the kind of recognition that comes with a podium and a flag and people in the audience who already know what they're about to hear. This is not even really a story about the military. Not in the way you might be thinking. This is a story about a Tuesday morning in February. A grocery store checkout. A man counting coins. And the 8 seconds that changed how one woman understood the word ordinary. His name was Ray. You've seen men like him. You've walked past them. And maybe you've even been behind one in linea at the pharmacy, at the post office, or at the hardware store. They are phoned to call a manager. Ray touched his left breast pocket just once. He touched it the way you touch something you've touched 1,000 times before, not looking at it, not thinking about it, just making sure it's still there. Then he went back to his coins. Here's what nobody in that store knew about the old man at Register 7. He'd been waking up at 5:45 in the morning for 47 years. Not because of an alarm, but because his body just did itsome things from the army stay longer than others. The grocery run on Tuesdays was something he'd started when his wife Carol was still alive to beat the crowd. She'd been gone 6 years now, but he still went early to buy his oatmeal, coffee, 1 orange bread, time equals .65s in the newspaper. He liked the paper version because he liked having something to hold. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building on Leonard Street, where the neighbors knew him only as the quiet guy who nodded in the hallway. Nobody would have described Ray as a man with a story. He seemed like someone who had gotten through most of his life without making noise, and was content to keep going that way. The jacket was the only thing, though no one would have noticed. It was a working jacket with 1 zipper pull replaced by a keyring. But if you'd been close enough, you might have seen. Sewn into the left breast lining with the fabric side facing in. A small patch with a red background, a castle, and a shield. He'd sewn it in himself years ago, when he accepted that the places he used to wear it on the outside had mostly stopped existing. He touched it sometimes when he was standing in lines or waiting at red lights, and it felt like something solid in answer to a question he'd stopped asking out loud. Let me tell you what Ray Kowalski's hands had done before that morning at Register 7. The Army designates bomb disposal specialists as EOD explosive ordnance disposal. In the early years of Iraq, when IEDs were getting bigger and more sophisticated every month, someone had to walk toward them. Everyone else moved back. But the EOD tech walked forward alone and dealt with whatever was there. Ray deployed to Iraq in 2003, 2005, and again in 2007. His confirmed render-safe record over those 3 deployments was 183. That number means that 183 times Ray walked toward a device designed to kill him and the people behind him, and he made it stop being that. He never talked about it to his daughter or the guys he played cards with. The 3rd deployment is where it happened in Kirkuk. September 2007. Ray was working a suspicious anomaly when the device partially detonated. The overpressure wave hit his hands first, shattering bones and damaging nerve clusters in ways that surgeries could only partially repair. He could hold things and pour coffee, but the trembling in his hands was post-blast peripheral neuropathy nerve damage from overpressure. It didn't look like a war wound. It just looked like old age. Somewhere in this country, there are men and women who have children and grandchildren now because of those 183 times. Not one of them was standing in that major except for Denise Okafor, the manager. Denise was good at her job and quick to assess situations. She was halfway through a polite apology to Kevin when Ray reached into his pocket and his jacket fell open. She stopped because she had seen that patch before in a photograph her brother Marcus had shown her. Marcus had pointed to a man in a photo from Mosul and said, "That's the guy. The EOD guy. He found it before we drove over it." Denise looked at Ray and asked quietly if he was 5th Engineers. Ray looked up, and when his eyes moved to the patch in his open jacket, something shifted in his face, no warmth, but a quiet recognition. He nodded once. Denise thought about her brother and how long it had taken him to sleep normally again. She thought about the man who had walked toward death so her brother could come home to eat Christmas dinner. She looked at the man in the Carhartt jacket whose hands had finally stilled as he held his receipt. She told him her brother was with the 3rd Infantry in 2006 and had told her about an EOD tech who found something they'd driven over for a week. Ray looked at her for a long moment and asked, "He made it home?" When she said he did, Ray nodded, picked up his bag, touched his breast pocket, and said, "Good." That was all he said. Kevin Pratt moved up to the register with his AirPods back in, never knowing what he had been standing behind. Ray walked out into the gray, cold morning and sat in his 2009 Buick for a moment before starting the engine. He wasn't the type to catalog moments of recognition. It just felt real and solid, like the patch against his chest. He thought about Marcus, a stranger who had come home and eventually learned to sleep again. Ray would never know his name, and that was how it was supposed to work. You did the job, and the job disappeared behind you. You came home to an apartment. You counted your coins. And you let people sigh behind you in line because they were late to something that mattered to them. That was the whole point, that there someplace to be still existed. He pulled out of the lot and took the side streets home past the old houses and the church marquee. I keep thinking about that checkout line, about Kevin, who will never know, and about Denise, who called her brother that evening just to hear his voice. And I think about Ray, sitting at his table with his newspaper and one orange, reading about the world he'd spent 11 years making it possible for someone else to worry about. There's a man like him near you, probably, moving slower than the morning rush would like and count coins with hands that carry something you can't see from where you're standing. I wonder what you'd do if you knew.